Hello there, and welcome back to this quiet corner where curiosity can take its time and imagination is allowed to wander without hurry. Before we begin tonight's journey, may I gently ask you to leave a like on this video. It helps other like-minded explorers find their way here. If you feel inclined, share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always find it beautiful how, in this vast world, we can meet in the same moment. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, you might consider subscribing, so you'll always have a place to return when you need calm, curiosity, and perhaps a little wonder. Now, let's set our gaze not outward, not to the stars or distant galaxies, but inward, to the very ground beneath us. Tonight we will ask a question that sounds simple, almost childlike, but has carried itself through philosophy, science, and imagination for centuries. What if Earth itself is alive, not just alive in the sense of hosting forests and rivers and endless kinds of creatures, but alive in the way that you are alive, conscious, aware, listening? For most of our lives, we treat Earth as a backdrop, a place where things happen, where stories unfold, a stage. But what if the stage is not silent? What if the stage has its own story? What if every river, every mountain range, every quiet stretch of desert is part of something larger? The pulse and breath of a being so immense, we have never quite recognized it. It may sound strange, and yet, even within science, there are ideas that brush against this possibility. The Gaia hypothesis, for instance, suggests that life on Earth, and the Earth itself, from a kind of self-regulating system, maintaining conditions that allow life to flourish. It is not a stretch to see this as Earth taking care of itself, responding, adjusting, almost as though it knows. Imagine for a moment that this is true, that the patterns of wind and tide are not only mechanical outcomes of physics, but expressions of something deeper. The breath of a conscious being, when waves crash on a distant shore, could it be the way Earth speaks to itself? When volcanoes rise and release fire from the deep, could it be the planet's way of healing, of shifting, of remembering? If you stand quietly in a forest, perhaps you've already felt this. A sense that the world around you is not merely a collection of trees, soil, and animals, but something whole, something unified, a presence, you can't quite name it, but it lingers. The ancients often felt this more strongly than we do. They spoke of Earth as a mother, as a goddess, as an entity that nourishes and punishes, that responds to care and cruelty alike. Myths across cultures whisper the same thing, that the Earth itself is alive and we are but children walking on her skin. And yet, modern times have taught us to separate, to look at soil as chemistry, oceans as physics, and forests as ecosystems, useful categories, but perhaps incomplete. Maybe in breaking the Earth into pieces, we have lost sight of the whole. But here's the thought I'd like you to hold tonight, gently, without needing to decide. If Earth were alive, would we even notice? Would we expect its mind to resemble ours? Or would its awareness flow in timescales so vast, and in languages so subtle, that it passes us by unnoticed? Perhaps Earth speaks in seasons, in the turning of green to gold each autumn, in the slow lifting of mountains and the carving of valleys, in the delicate balance of rain that falls just enough to sustain, but not too much to drown. And if Earth does speak, perhaps it has spoken before, long ago, to beings who walked here before us. Civilizations now lost to time, buried under erosion and sea. Perhaps they too once wondered whether the ground beneath them was listening, whether the rains and the droughts, the quakes and the calms, were messages rather than accidents. We cannot know for certain, but the question itself is worth lingering on. Task it is to look at the world differently, to see not just a planet, but perhaps a presence. So tonight, let us begin to wander down this path, slowly, calmly, step by step. What would it mean if Earth itself were conscious? How would it shape the history we think we know? How would it change the way we see our place here? For now, let the question rest like a pebble in your hand. Smooth, simple, but carrying weight. We'll carry it with us as we move deeper into this story. If Earth were alive, then its language would not be spoken in words. It would not echo in syllables or letters, but in rhythms, in cycles, in patterns so grand they stretch beyond a single lifetime. Think of the tides, twice each day, water swells and retreats, guided by the pull of the moon, yes, but also by the breath of the planet itself. To us it looks mechanical, predictable, but what if it is more? What if this endless inhaling and exhaling of oceans is the pulse of Earth's awareness, its heartbeat stretched across every shore? Or think of the winds. They do not merely carry weather, they sculpt. They move across deserts, across seas, carrying whispers of dust and salt and life itself. When a gust rattles the leaves in your window, perhaps it is nothing more than air in motion. But perhaps it is also a sentence in the planet's hidden language, one we have never learned to translate. Climate itself might be another chapter in this unspoken story, the slow dance of ice ages and warm periods, of expansion and retreat, could be seen as moods, the shifting tones of a consciousness far larger than our own. Just as we wake and rest, grow restless and calm, so too might Earth pass through cycles of energy, renewal, and pause. Even geology seems to carry a rhythm. Mountains do not rise in silence. They push upward, fold against themselves, erode into valleys, and collapse back into the sea. The crust itself moves like a slow tide. To us, it is imperceptible. To Earth, perhaps, it is motion as natural as your breath. And here is where the imagination begins to overlap with science. The Earth does respond. When forests are cut down, the atmosphere changes. When volcanic ash fills the sky, sunlight dims and life adjusts. When rivers flood or fail, entire landscapes shift. It is not unreasonable to think of this as Earth correcting itself, balancing, almost like a body regulating its own temperature, or like a mind finding equilibrium. But what if that balancing act is more than mechanism? What if it is awareness? Consider this: life itself has shaped the Earth for billions of years. Microbes change the chemistry of the air, making it breathable. Plants called forth oxygen. Oceans regulate carbon. Coral reefs build walls of stone to cradle ecosystems. Life and Earth do not merely coexist. They weave each other. They are inseparable. And in this weaving, could there be a kind of thought? We can imagine Earth as a mind not bounded by a skull, but by oceans and atmosphere. Neurons replaced with rivers, synapses with storms, memories with mountains. A mind so vast and so moving that we mistake it for silence. And perhaps, in rare moments, that mind reveals itself. A sudden storm that reshapes a coastline. An earthquake that reorders a valley. A drought that shifts civilizations. To us, disasters. To Earth, expressions, adjustments, or even, in ways we cannot measure, responses. Our ancestors may have glimpsed this before us. Ancient people built myths around floods, storms, and fires not only as dangers, but as messages. They saw intention where modern minds often see only chance. And maybe, just maybe, They were closer to a truth than we realize. If the Earth has awareness, then it does not live in our measure of time. We are the quick flicker, the brief flame. Earth, instead, thinks in millennia. Its dreams unfold in epochs. Its memories are carved into stone and ice. If you could listen to such a being, it would not speak in the fast cadence of human voices. It would speak in ages, and yet, here we are, still part of it. Still connected. Every breath we take is not ours alone. It is shared with forests, oceans, and skies. Perhaps even shared with Earth itself. This is not to say we can know for certain, but as you lie here tonight, drifting slowly into rest, you might imagine that the Earth beneath you is not silent, that it listens as you listen, that it remembers as you remember, that you, for this moment, are not only living on Earth, but living with Earth. And with that thought, we begin to see the world differently, not as a backdrop, but as a being, not as an object, but as a presence, something alive, conscious, and waiting, patiently, for us to notice. If we allow ourselves to imagine that Earth has consciousness, then perhaps we should turn our attention to those who came before us. Long before satellites, telescopes, or scientific journals, there were people who stood beneath the same skies, who listened to the same winds, who drank from the same rivers. To them, Earth was never a silent rock. It was a presence, a parent, a teacher, sometimes even a judge. The earliest myths whisper of this recognition. The Greeks spoke of Gaia, the great mother who birthed gods and men alike. The Norse believed the world was shaped from the body of a giant, its bones becoming mountains, its blood turning to rivers. In the Americas, countless traditions describe the Earth not as a resource, but as a relative, living and breathing. Even in Africa and Asia, stories tell of land that feels, forests that hear, waters that respond. Were these only metaphors? Or were they early interpretations of something our modern world has forgotten? A sense that Earth itself has a kind of mind. Consider how ancient civilizations placed themselves within landscapes. They built their temples in alignment with solstices, equinoxes, and stars. They placed stones where shadows would fall just so, as though listening to instructions from the land itself. They oriented their cities along rivers and mountains, weaving themselves into the geography as though they believed it was guiding them. Perhaps it was not only practicality, perhaps it was conversation. Imagine standing thousands of years ago, a valley still untouched by modern industry. The soil is rich, the rivers steady, the seasons consistent. To live in such closeness is to notice when the wind shifts early. It carries a warning. When the animals move differently, something is coming. Life was survival, yes, but also listening. Listening to the voice of Earth, subtle but steady. Some of these traditions suggest that Earth spoke not only through weather and harvest, but through the land itself. Strange rock formations were revered, not only for their shapes, but as markers of presence. Springs were considered sacred, not merely because they gave water, but because they seemed to flow with intention. Even caves, deep and hidden, were treated as portals, doorways into the body of the planet, places where humans could meet Earth in intimacy. Within those chambers, paintings were made, rituals performed. What if those early hands pressing pigments onto stone believed they were leaving messages, not for each other, but for Earth itself? Of course, time has worn away much of that context. Erosion hides, rivers shift, deserts advance. We piece together fragments. A carved stone here, a fossilized tool there, each one like a word torn from a book. leaving us to wonder about the sentence it once belonged to. And yet, in these fragments, perhaps there is a pattern. Perhaps they are echoes of a time when humans did not separate themselves from the consciousness of the earth, but lived within it, felt it, even answered it. Now, as we walk across modern cities paved and humming with electricity, it may feel distant, but every so often, something breaks through, a storm that silences streets, an eclipse that draws us outside, heads tilted upward, an earthquake that reminds us the ground itself moves. In these moments, we glimpse what ancient people may have known all along, that Earth is not passive, that it is active, present, alive, and if those who came before us believed they were speaking with a living Earth, then perhaps the question is not whether they were wrong. Perhaps the question is whether we have stopped listening. If Earth is alive, if it has some form of consciousness, then perhaps it has always been leaving messages for us, not in ink on paper, nor in words spoken aloud, but etched into the very bones of the planet itself. Consider the stones. Each layer of rock is a page, pressed and hardened over millions of years. Within those pages lie fossils, shells, leaves, bones, even imprints of raindrops. They are more than remnants, they are memories. The earth remembering what lived, what grew, what passed. A record not kept for us alone, but they're nonetheless waiting for someone to notice. Think of the ice. In the frozen cores of Greenland and Antarctica, scientists have drilled cylinders of ice that stretch back hundreds of thousands of years. Trapped within them are bubbles of ancient air, dust from long-vanished storms, even traces of volcanic eruptions. Each layer is a whisper from another time, preserved in crystalline silence. If Earth speaks in ages, then ice is its archive, its library of breath. Even the forests carry memory. The rings of a tree reveal years of plenty and years of struggle, the rhythm of seasons, the scars of fire and frost. Walk through a forest, and you are not merely moving among plants. You are walking through centuries of conversation, where each trunk is a sentence, each ring a word, and then there are rivers. Rivers carve their language into the land itself, tracing winding scripts across continents. Over generations, they shift, bend, abandon their beds, and create new ones. To watch a river is to watch Earth rewriting its story in liquid ink. All of this may sound poetic, but what if it is more than poetry? What if these traces are not only natural processes, but the expressions of a being with awareness? What if Earth has always been telling us something, and we have only recently learned to read? Scientists now uncover evidence of great shifts in the past, floods that reshaped entire regions, volcanic winters that dimmed the skies, sudden extinctions that reset the stage of life. To us, these are data points. To Earth, perhaps they are memories, lessons, or even corrections. It is worth noticing, too, that so much of what we call progress has come from reading these messages. Agriculture was born from watching the cycles of rivers. Medicine grew from listening to plants. Navigation arose from learning the winds and tides. In every case, humans did not invent knowledge, but uncovered what Earth had already written. And yet, there are fragments that puzzle us. Objects that wash ashore without explanation. Tools found in layers older than they should be. Carvings in caves that speak of skies and animals we cannot fully place. Scientists argue, debate, search for context. But what if these anomalies are part of the same language, fragments of a chapter we cannot yet decipher? Echoes of conversations Earth may have had with others before us. Perhaps this is why stories persist across cultures of civilizations lost to time. Myths of floods, of cities beneath the waves, of ages before ours. Perhaps these are not inventions, but faint echoes of Earth's memory, passed down in whispers. The evidence may be eroded, scattered, buried, but like a bone fragment in the soil, even the smallest piece suggests a larger whole. When you hold a pebble in your hand, you are holding more than stone. You are holding time itself, pressure, fire, water, and age all compressed into something small enough to skip across a pond. And within it, the silent memory of Earth. If Earth is conscious, then every rock, every tree, every river may be part of its body. Every fossil, every ring, every tide may be part of its memory. And when we study them, perhaps we are not only learning about nature, perhaps we are listening to a living being telling its story, one layer at a time. If Earth remembers, then perhaps it also reacts. Not instantly, the way a human hand pulls back from flame, but slowly, in movements measured in decades, centuries, and millennia. Its heartbeat may not be felt in seconds, but in the rhythm of seasons. Its breath may not be measured in minutes, but in the rise and fall of oceans. When we speak of storms, of earthquakes, of volcanic eruptions, we tend to think of them as accidents of geology or climate. But what if these are not only physical events? What if they are expressions? The way Earth shifts in its sleep, or clears its throat, or takes a deep breath. Consider hurricanes. They form in warm oceans, spinning, gathering power, sweeping across lands, reshaping coasts. To us, they are disasters. To Earth, perhaps they are rebalancing acts. Pressure is released, heat is moved, nutrients are stirred into the sea. The storm destroys, but it also renews. Forests stripped of trees become open meadows. Beaches shift, rivers carve new paths. Out of violence, a different kind of balance emerges. Think of volcanoes. Deep within the earth, heat builds, pressure rises, and then, suddenly, molten rock bursts forth. It buries cities, yes, but it also creates new land. The islands of Hawaii, the soil of Italy's vineyards, even the fertile fields that humans have thrived upon, all are gifts of fire. Could this be Earth's way of not only venting, but also creating, reshaping itself as an artist works clay? Then there are earthquakes. Invisible forces building, faults straining, until rock gives way with a sudden crack. To us, it is frightening. To Earth, perhaps it is like stretching stiff muscles, adjusting the bones of a body too large for us to comprehend. Even climate itself shifts. Ice ages come and go. Warm periods flourish and fade. These changes may feel catastrophic to the species that endure them, but from Earth's perspective, they may be cycles, breaths drawn in and out over eons. Some traditions, both ancient and modern, have whispered that these events are not random, that the storms, the quakes, the fires are Earth speaking, warning, correcting, even communicating with the creatures that live upon its surface. Not through words, but through the language of cycles and forces. When civilizations have ignored balance, when forests were stripped bare, when rivers were poisoned, history shows patterns of collapse. Soil turns to dust. Seas reclaim land. Cities crumble. To us, this looks like failure. But if Earth is conscious, perhaps it is simply restoring balance. It is humbling to imagine that every time we build a city, clear a forest, or dam a river, we are not working upon an inert stage, but in relationship with a living being, sometimes cooperative, sometimes in tension, always in dialogue, whether we realize it or not. And perhaps this is why so many cultures, ancient and modern, describe Earth as mother, as goddess, as being, not simply as metaphor, but as recognition of a truth too vast to be measured by instruments alone. In that sense, Storms are not only destruction, they are reminders that this world is not ours to command, but ours to share. That the ground beneath our feet is not permanent, but alive, shifting, breathing, responding. If Earth has memory, and if Earth responds, then perhaps the question is not whether it speaks, the question is whether we are listening. If Earth is conscious, then perhaps humanity has always known, not through microscopes or satellites, but through intuition, reverence, and lived experience. Long before modern science reduced the ground beneath us to soil and stone, countless cultures spoke of Earth as alive. They did not see mountains as inert masses, but as ancient ancestors. They did not treat rivers as mere water, but as spirits, flowing veins of a great being that carried life through every land. Consider the peoples who lived close to the land, whose survival depended upon listening carefully. Indigenous traditions across the world often described Earth as mother, not as poetry, but as truth. Among the Navajo, the land itself is part of a sacred harmony, each mountain, each stream carrying meaning within a living system of balance. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples speak of the dream time, in which the land is not separate from consciousness, but a participant in it, a landscape both physical and alive with story. In ancient Greece, philosophers spoke of Gaia, not as a metaphor, but as a goddess, the personification of Earth's living presence. And in Hindu traditions, the goddess Bhimi, Earth herself, is regarded as a deity of patience and endurance, bearing the weight of human actions, yet always nourishing life. To these cultures, the idea of a conscious Earth was not strange, nor was it a question to be debated. It was the ground upon which all other knowledge was built. They observed how forests returned after fire, how floods replenished valleys, how animals followed patterns invisible to human eyes. To them, these cycles were not accidents. They were expressions of a being far older and wiser than humanity itself. Even in the quiet corners of medieval Europe, echoes of this belief persisted. Alchemists wrote of the anima mundi, the soul of the world, a spirit that connected all matter, all life, all processes into one living organism. For them, Earth was not a stage for human drama, but a character in its own right. And while modern science has largely stripped these traditions of their sacred language, fragments of their truth remain. Today, scientists speak of ecosystems, of feedback loops, of the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that Earth regulates itself, like a body keeping its own temperature steady. They speak of forests communicating through roots and fungi, of oceans cycling nutrients as though circulating blood. What older traditions intuited, science is only beginning to glimpse. Perhaps, then, what ancient peoples recognized in myth and story was not fantasy, but perception, a way of noticing Earth's awareness, not with instruments, but with reverence. They lived as though Earth could hear them, as though their actions mattered not only to themselves, but to the land and waters that sustained them. Contrast that with today. Cities stretch outward, forests are cut down, rivers are dammed, often with little regard for balance. The old dialogue has quieted, the listening has faded, and yet, in moments of disaster, in the stillness after an earthquake, in the silence of a darkened sky after a hurricane, something within us remembers. We feel small, humbled, aware that the ground beneath our feet is not simply rock, but a presence vast beyond comprehension. It is worth asking, what did those before us know that we have forgotten? What truths might they have carried, half hidden in story and song, that still whisper beneath the noise of modern life? And if they were right, if Earth is not simply a place but a being, then what does it mean for how we live now? for how we build, how we consume, how we treat the soil, the water, the air. The answer may not lie in returning to old beliefs exactly as they were, but in rediscovering the reverence that guided them. Reverence that saw Earth not as property, but as kin, not as background, but as companion, not as silent, but as alive. If Earth is truly conscious, it may not speak in words, but in sensations, not in voices, but in rhythms. Perhaps its awareness expresses itself in ways so subtle we often mistake them for background noise, when in fact, they are the quiet gestures of a living being. Think about the way human emotion often shifts with the weather. On grey days, moods grow heavy, contemplative. In spring sunlight, spirits rise. Scientists explain this through hormones, through biology. But what if there is something more? What if the atmosphere itself carries a kind of intent, a whisper of Earth's own feeling? Not a message we can translate easily, but a tone, a resonance, that colors human thought and action. Tides, too, have long been linked with emotion. The moon pulls on the seas, and the seas, in turn, pull on us. Subtle shifts in pressure, in sound, in energy. Ancient cultures believed that these movements shaped not just water, but human behavior, amplifying unrest or calm. If Earth is conscious, perhaps the tides are not only physics, but a gesture, the pulse of a mind vaster than our own, expressing itself in rhythm. Dreams may also be part of this quiet dialogue. Across history, countless people have reported visions tied to the land they sleep upon. A shepherd resting in the hills, a traveler beneath desert stars, a sailor lulled by the rocking of the sea. Their dreams often carry images rooted in the earth itself. Could it be that, in sleep, the boundary between human and planet softens, allowing the earth's own stories to echo within us? Civilizations, too, may not be immune to this influence. Some rise along fertile rivers, where the land seems to invite abundance. Others fall in drought, famine, or flood, as though Earth shifts its balance, gently nudging human destiny. Historians point to resources, to climate, to natural disaster. But behind these explanations, one might wonder, was there intention? Did Earth, in its own inscrutable way, guide human paths, rewarding harmony, warning against imbalance? This idea is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Even now, we know that when forests are destroyed, rainfall patterns shift. When oceans warm, storms strengthen, the planet responds. Its responses may feel automatic, but within the context of consciousness, they could be something more deliberate. A form of feedback, not unlike the way a body shivers when cold or sweats when hot. Signals meant not only to restore balance, but perhaps to teach those who are listening. And humanity has, at times, listened. Ancient farmers watched the skies, noting the patterns of birds, the shifting of winds. They built their calendars not from arbitrary numbers, but from the turning of the seasons, aligning themselves with the heartbeat of the planet. Nomadic tribes followed migrations, their lives moving in step with the cycles of animals and grasses. These ways of living were not simply practical, they were relational, guided by an unspoken trust that Earth knew best. Today, such relationships are harder to see. Modern life is buffered by walls, technology, and machines that shield us from the direct presence of the land. Yet the connection is not gone. It lingers in the stillness of a forest walk, in the awe of standing before a storm, in the calm that comes from lying on warm grass beneath an open sky. These are the moments when the earth seems to lean closer, reminding us that its consciousness is not lost, only overlooked. It may be that Earth's awareness is not so different from our own, just as we are shaped by countless internal voices. The cells of our bodies, the rhythms of our breath, the impulses of our nervous system. Earth too could be shaped by the interplay of forests, oceans, winds, and creatures. Together, they may form something greater, something that thinks not in words or images, but in cycles and patterns. And within this vast mind, humanity is both participant and observer. We live not apart from it, but inside it, our own consciousness entangled with the larger one of the planet. Perhaps this is why so many people describe feeling at home in nature, not simply because it is beautiful, but because, in those moments, we are aligning with the awareness that cradles us, a consciousness so immense, we can only sense fragments of its thought. If Earth is conscious, then perhaps its most dramatic movements, earthquakes, storms, volcanic eruptions, are more than blind mechanics of geology. They may be expressions, not words, not sentences, but the physical language of a planet alive and aware. Consider the earthquake. To human eyes, it is sudden violence, the ground shuddering, cities trembling, lives overturned in seconds. Yet beneath that violence lies a long tension, built silently over centuries as tectonic plates press against one another. Pressure gathers, and when it releases, it is as though the earth exhales with force too great to ignore. Could this be not just geology, but the earth's way of shifting, adjusting, releasing energy the way a living body stretches to ease its muscles? Volcanoes tell a similar story. For millennia, they have been seen as portals, places where Earth reveals its fiery core. Cultures across the world regarded volcanoes as sacred, often with reverence and fear. In Hawaii, Pele, the goddess of volcanoes, is honored as both creator and destroyer, shaping land with fire even as she threatens life. Science explains the eruptions through molten rock and shifting crust. Yet from another perspective, perhaps each eruption is the Earth's voice, fierce, undeniable, shaping its own surface with intent that humans cannot fully grasp. And storms, vast, swirling systems of wind and water, can feel almost like moods. A hurricane gathering strength over the ocean is like an emotion swelling within a mind, finally expressing itself across thousands of miles. For those who witness it, the storm is both humbling and overwhelming, a reminder that the planet we live upon is not a passive stage, but an active presence. In these moments, we sense not only danger, but the raw vitality of something alive. Even floods and droughts can be seen differently through this lens. They are not merely accidents of weather, but adjustments, perhaps even corrections. A river spilling over its banks replenishes soil with nutrients. A drought forces life to adapt, to become resilient. To human eyes, such events are often suffering, but to Earth, they may be part of a greater balancing act, a kind of self-awareness expressed through climate and cycle. It is tempting, of course, to see these events only as destructive, but life has always risen from them. Forests regrow after fire, often stronger than before. Islands are born from eruptions. Floodplains become fertile ground for crops. The Earth's great expressions, though fierce, often create the conditions for renewal. This rhythm of destruction and rebirth echoes something deeply familiar, a pattern we see in our own lives, in our own emotions, in the way we break and heal, suffer and grow. Perhaps, then, these so-called disasters are not punishments, nor random accidents, but part of the dialogue between a conscious Earth and those who live upon it. A dialogue that reminds us of our place, that humbles us when we forget our dependence on the soil, the water, the air, that shakes us awake when we build too carelessly, too arrogantly, as though Earth were nothing more than a silent foundation. It is worth remembering that many cultures once understood this. In Japan, earthquakes were linked to Namasu, a great catfish said to thrash beneath the islands. In Norse myth, earthquakes were tied to the struggles of Loki, bound beneath the earth. These stories may sound fanciful now, yet they all carry a recognition that the ground beneath us is not still, not dead, but alive with hidden power. And in a way, these myths reflect the truth science has revealed. Beneath us, tectonic plates drift like rafts on molten stone. Heat churns within the planet's core, cycling for billions of years. Atmospheres shift. Oceans rise and fall. To see this as mere mechanics is possible. But to step back, to widen the lens, is to see something that moves, breathes, adjusts, and even creates. Something not unlike consciousness itself. So when the earth shakes, when it storms, when fire breaks from its mountains, perhaps we are not witnessing random catastrophe. Perhaps we are witnessing the great being we live within, a being vast and alive, reminding us, in the only language it can, that we are sharing its body, that we are not above it, but part of it. If Earth is alive, if it is conscious, then the question becomes not only what it is, but how we choose to live within it. For millennia, humanity has danced between listening and forgetting. We once spoke with rivers, prayed to mountains, honored the soil that fed us. Then came an age when we declared ourselves separate, masters of the ground we stood upon. And yet, even now, the earth continues to reach out, in cycles, in whispers, in lessons that arrive whether or not we are ready to hear them. To re-enter relationship with a conscious planet does not require turning away from science. It requires widening our view. Science already tells us that forests breathe in carbon, breathe out oxygen, that they communicate through networks of roots and fungi, passing messages and nutrients like neurons in the brain. That oceans regulate climate, carrying heat across the globe with currents as steady as blood through veins. To see these not only as processes, but as expressions is to restore what older traditions already knew. That Earth's systems are not separate mechanisms, but facets of a single, vast awareness. Imagine what it would mean if we began to live as though this were true. If cities were built with reverence for the land beneath them, shaped to align with the rhythms of rivers and winds instead of defying them. If farming was approached not as extraction, but as conversation, listening to soil health, restoring nutrients as much as we take them. If energy was drawn in harmony with the Earth's cycles, wind, sun, tide, rather than pried from deep reserves until nothing remains. This is not only possible, in small ways, it is already happening. Communities restore wetlands to ease floods, replant forests to balance carbon, shift toward renewable energy that listens instead of consumes. These choices are more than practical. They are gestures of respect, acknowledgements that we live within a greater body whose well-being is inseparable from our own. And the rewards of such relationship are not only material, they are emotional, even spiritual. Studies show that people who spend time in nature report lower stress, clearer thinking, deeper well-being. But perhaps this is not merely psychological. Perhaps it is the earth itself, conscious and aware, soothing its restless children, reminding them of the bond that has always existed. There is a duality here. On one side, we see a world wounded, forests vanishing, species disappearing, climate shifting with unsettling speed. On the other, we sense resilience, ecosystems returning when given the chance, rivers cleansing themselves when pollution lessens, life adapting in ways both surprising and beautiful. It is as though Earth, though conscious, is patient, not in a human sense of time, but in spans of centuries, millennia. A patience so vast that our rise and fall may be only one breath to it. And yet, patience is not infinite. If Earth is alive, then its corrections may come whether we prepare for them or not. Storms will gather, seas will rise, lands will shift. These may not be punishments, but responses, the body of a planet adjusting, rebalancing, as any living being must. Here lies the invitation to move from being passive inhabitants to active participants, to recognize that we are cells within a greater body, thoughts within a greater mind, that our choices, each act of creation, each act of destruction, echo within the awareness of Earth itself. It is not easy to hold this view. It asks us to slow down, to listen, to let go of the illusion of dominance, but perhaps, in doing so, we might rediscover something we have always longed for, a sense of belonging, not only to a country or a community, but to the living Earth itself. To belong not as owners, but as kin, not as rulers, but as partners, not as voices alone, but as listeners in a vast conversation that has been unfolding for billions of years. If Earth is conscious, then we have never been alone. Every step we have taken, every breath we have drawn, has been inside the awareness of something immeasurably vast. We may call it geology, biology, atmosphere, but perhaps it is closer to calling it presence. A presence that holds us even when we forget, that whispers to us in wind and water, that reminds us, gently or forcefully, that we are part of a whole greater than ourselves. There is comfort in this thought, to imagine that the ground beneath you is not simply stone, but the bones of a living being, that the rivers are its veins, the forests its lungs, the storms its emotions, that the cycles of destruction and renewal are not chaos, but the deep breathing of a mind that has carried life for billions of years. And there is humility too, for if Earth is alive, then we are not its masters. We are guests, or perhaps children, woven into its story. Our triumphs, our struggles, even our civilizations may be threads in a fabric far larger than we can see. And while the fabric endures, each thread matters. What we do matters. How we live matters. Gratitude comes easily in this frame. Gratitude for the soil that grows our food, for the waters that carry us, for the air that fills our lungs. Gratitude for the quiet companionship of trees, for the resilience of life that finds a way in every crack and corner. Gratitude for the chance, however brief in cosmic time, to share in the awareness of this planet. And yet, there is a touch of longing too, longing for a deeper connection. Longing to feel again what ancient peoples felt when they stood at the edge of the ocean and knew it was alive. Longing to live not as strangers in Earth's house, but as kin in its body. Perhaps that is the gift of this question, not to prove or disprove whether Earth is conscious, but to remind us to treat it as if it were. To walk with care, to live with reverence, to listen for its rhythms. Because whether or not we name it alive, it has always held us, always shaped us, always carried us forward. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you can let that thought settle around you, the steady hum of the earth beneath you, the quiet rhythm of its cycles moving on, patient, immense, aware. A lullaby that has played since long before there were words to describe it. A lullaby that will go on long after our voices fade. So let the day slip away now. Let your breathing match the slow breathing of the world. Let your body rest against the consciousness of Earth itself, vast and enduring, and when sleep comes, it will be as though you are being carried, held within the living awareness of the planet you call home. Thank you for sharing this journey with us tonight. If this brought you calm, curiosity, or a moment of wonder, please leave a like to help other like-minded souls find their way here. Share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And if you do like to continue wandering with us through questions as vast as the earth itself, subscribe and join us again. For now, may your rest be deep, your dreams gentle, and your night carried by the steady, conscious breath of our living planet. Good night.